The public is being conditioned to look at the sky. They are being sold a $151 billion kinetic shield against a threat vector that is already obsolete. The press announces new awards for the SHIELD program, framing it as a triumph of defensive technology. This is a fatal miscalculation. The focus on intercepting incoming ballistic assets ignores the fundamental doctrine of asymmetric warfare. You do not attack your opponent's strengths. You attack their systemic dependencies. The true vector is not kinetic. It is silent. Every financial transaction, every military command, every unit of economic energy flows through a handful of undersea fiber optic cables. This is the global central nervous system. According to RUSI analyses, the kinetic cost to sever these nodes is trivial compared to the systemic paralysis it would trigger. A state facing a domestic solvency crisis, such as the lethal crackdowns in Iran, has no incentive to engage in a launch-on-warning scenario. It cannot win. It has every incentive to choose the silent option. The second silent vector is orbital. While SHIELD enlists firms like AST SpaceMobile to build a defensive canopy, the adversary's objective is not to penetrate it, but to blind it. Satellite blinding and dazzling technologies do not require a missile launch. They require ground-based lasers or co-orbital microsatellites. The objective is not destruction, it is the creation of cataracts over the eyes of the state. An adversary cannot defeat the Leviathan, but they can blind it. This is the blueprint for creating the blind Leviathan, a nation-state with unparalleled kinetic power rendered inert because its senses have been severed, a trillion-dollar military that cannot receive targeting data, a multi-trillion-dollar economy frozen because its transaction protocols are offline. The missile shield is not a defense, it's an accelerant. By removing the conventional option, it becomes a mathematical certainty that a desperate regime will pivot to the silent, indefensible vectors. This isn't a possibility. It's a protocol. A nation-state is not a country. It is a corporation with a flag. And like any corporation, it can face a solvency crisis. The primary liability is never external debt. It is domestic dissent. UN officials report on Iran's use of lethal force against internal protests. This is not an act of strength. It is the liquidation of political capital to service an immediate liability, the population itself. When a regime's domestic liabilities exceed its political assets, it must generate a win externally to rebalance the ledger. CSIS analysis of Russia's war effort frames it not as a war of conquest, but as a desperate solvency event. An unpopular war becomes its own liability, consuming materiel and political support. The kinetic cost of conventional operations becomes unsustainable. This is the blueprint. Now, introduce an external catalyst. The U.S. SHIELD program, a $151 billion layered defense architecture, is not a shield. It is a targeted financial weapon designed to render an adversary's primary military asset, their ballistic missile arsenal, worthless. It bankrupts their deterrence strategy. By removing the viability of conventional kinetic leverage, you corner the regime. This is the inflection point. A state facing internal collapse, whose primary external weapon has been rendered obsolete, does not surrender. It pivots. It is a mathematical certainty. The pivot is always toward asymmetry, vectors where the cost-to-damage ratio is exponentially favorable and for which a missile shield offers zero protection. Weakness forces this hand. It's not a choice. It's a function of solvency. The math of modern conflict is inverted. Analysts at the Royal United Services Institute, RUSI, document the new calculus. The kinetic cost to neutralize a $5 million main battle tank is now as low as $500. The price of a single FPV drone. This isn't warfare. It's a solvency crisis for legacy military platforms. This radical shift in the lethality-to-cost ratio is known as the democratization of violence. The ability to liquidate strategic assets is no longer monopolized by states. It is now commoditized. While the U.S. SHIELD program allocates a contract ceiling of $151 billion to defeat expensive state-launched missiles, it has zero functional defense against a swarm of cheap, commercially available drones. By overinvesting in high-cost defense against obsolete threats, the system creates a mathematical incentive for adversaries to pivot to low-cost, high-volume asymmetric vectors for which there is no economic or technical countermeasure. The kinetic cost of a direct state-on-state exchange is now prohibitive. The real vector for strategic assault is not through the sky, but through the seams of the global system. The question is not if a cornered state will pivot to asymmetric warfare, but where they will stage it from. The answer is found in the gray zone. CSIS analytics confirm the protocol. Utilize states with systemic internal decay as proxy laboratories. The recent travel advisories concerning regions like South Africa are not the crisis itself. They are a symptom. They signal the emergence of a permissive environment, a liability shield for a state patron to stage attacks with plausible deniability. A regime facing a terminal solvency crisis, as documented by UN officials in Iran, has zero incentive for conventional restraint. Its primary leverage, its missile arsenal, is being rendered obsolete by the U.S. SHIELD program, a contract vehicle with a ceiling of $151 billion. This defensive overmatch creates a mathematical certainty, the pivot to unconventional assets. These gray zones provide the operational launchpad. They decouple the attack from the attacker, creating an act of economic war with no clear return address. An attack on subsea data cables or a nation's power grid, launched from a proxy territory, is not a missile launch. It is an accelerant for systemic collapse, for which a missile shield offers zero protection. The regional instability is not the story, it's the staging ground. The doctrine is known as launch on warning. It is a systemic protocol designed to counter a decapitation strike. Analysts at CSIS define it as a retaliatory launch authorized upon detection of an incoming attack, executed before the aggressor's warheads can impact and destroy friendly assets. It is not a policy of choice. It is a mathematical solution to a zero-sum game. When decision time is measured in minutes, the protocol removes human hesitation to guarantee a kinetic response. The integrity of this protocol is predicated on one variable: the absolute fidelity of early warning radar and satellite data. This is its systemic weak point. An adversary facing a solvency crisis like Iran, per UN reports, and rendered conventionally impotent by the U.S. SHIELD program, does not need to defeat the SHIELD. They only need to defeat the data. This creates the fog of digital war. A targeted cyber attack, a vector for which the $151 billion SHIELD offers zero protection, can blind the command network. It can spoof radar signals to simulate a massive inbound launch. The commander on watch is now presented with data showing national annihilation is minutes away. The data is false, but the protocol is real. He is now forced into an impossible calculation. To not launch risks the complete destruction of his nation's retaliatory capability if the attack is real. To launch is to initiate global thermonuclear war based on what could be a ghost in the machine. By removing an enemy's conventional options, you guarantee they will exploit these unconventional seams. The defensive shield becomes the accelerant for a self-inflicted wound. The core axiom of asymmetric warfare is that pressure seeks the weakest point. As UN reports confirm lethal force against internal dissent, the Iranian regime's political solvency is in crisis. Concurrently, the U.S. SHIELD program, a $151 billion technological fortress, is systematically neutralizing their primary external leverage, the missile arsenal. This is not a deterrent. It is an accelerant. By removing the kinetic option, we guarantee a pivot to non-kinetic vectors. The strategic liability is no longer a launch-on-warning scenario, but an attack vector for which a missile shield has zero utility. This is a mathematical certainty, not a prediction. Therefore, expect a calibration shot within the next 12 months. CSIS analysis points to an attribution impossible event targeting critical economic infrastructure. The highest probability vector is a systemic logic bomb disabling the crane and container logistics network of a Tier 1 maritime hub, such as the Port of Long Beach, for 96 hours. The objective is not destruction, but to collect data on U.S. response latency and economic pain tolerance.